And so finally, when I'm 15, my mom decides that she's just gonna leave Progreso and we're gonna start over. And she decides that she's gonna move to Trujillo, which is up on the coast. I mean, it's literally the furthest city that you can reach in Honduras that's not by boat. You know, like it's as far as the bus will go, you know, going northeast. And we just kind of started life there. There weren't any schools for me there. You know, that's where being a gringo really paid off for me. My brother Drew and I, we always crack up because our house was right behind one of the high schools. And we would always be sitting outside, you know, and we'd be saying hi to all these girls. And there were a lot of times that these girls would flash us. Just out of nowhere. We're just going, dude, like, what is going on? And it's basically because everyone knew that we were Americans. Mm-hmm. Everyone knew that we were gringos. And I don't know, I guess they wanted a gringo baby or something. They never got it. But yeah, and this is where my brother and I, you know, Trujillo was a lot poorer than Progreso. And this is where we really started translating for a lot of groups and hanging out with a lot of Americans coming in from a whole bunch of different denominations. So that's where being an American really, really kicked in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so your work translating for these groups, like what kind of work were they doing? How long were they there? And then did you maintain any kind of connection with any of them after they left?
Yeah, so usually it's just for about a week. Some of them, you know, they're building houses. Some folks were building churches. And then the biggest group that would always come in was this one group that would come in from Arkansas, and they would basically take over the hospital. I mean, every aspect of the hospital. So the crew consisted of over 90 doctors and nurses that would just take over the hospital and perform all sorts of operations and, you know, surgeries and different kinds of procedures for absolutely free. So free of charge. And, you know, and then they had little clinics where people would come in, you know, and this is usually how they decided who was going to be, or who needed surgery or who needed what. You know, they would have clinics and folks would come in and, you know, and I'd be sitting there with a doctor and this lady would just go, well, I got this lump right here, you know, and it's just this massive thing just kind of sticking out. You just went, oh man, like, you know, I'm 15. I'm like, I probably shouldn't be doing this. Like, is this legal? You know? But, you know, there I was. And, you know, with a lot of the groups, it was just kind of, you know, nice to meet you kind of thing. There were several times when they would, you know, we'd email back and forth. You know, early 2000s, you know, the IMs are starting to come in, you know, so, but I mean, I didn't have any money and it cost, you know, it was $2 for half an hour at the internet cafe, you know, and so I couldn't sit there and talk to people, you know, and if I did, it was just, you know, kind of like, okay, you know, I'm splitting these 30 minutes with my brother. You know, I'm going to talk to this girl or you know, this dude for like 10, 15 minutes, say goodbye. And then my brother's going to jump in, you know, things like that. But, you know, whenever, you know, the next year would come around, you know, whoever was in charge of the group would contact us and say, hey, are you guys, you know, in town, available? Can you guys help out? Yeah, so that doctor group, the last time I translated for them, I translated for this guy who's an orthopedic surgeon, and you know, he was just asking a lot of questions like, so you're American, what are you doing here? You know, like what's basically, you know, a lot of what's your future questions, you know, what are you going to be doing with your life kind of thing. And I didn't think much of it. But another lady had been talking to my brother Drew, and really putting a lot of ideas in his mind about him moving to Arkansas. So basically one day, we just called collect. So in Honduras, you go to Hondutel. Hondutel, is the phone company that you can go use, and they got the phone booths, and you go call collect. And basically Drew calls this lady collect and says, hey, like, we're ready to move to the States. And they just bought us a ticket, and they just took us in, basically. I remember going to San Pedro Sula. We had to go to the consulate to get our passports renewed. I hadn't used my passport in 7 years. And as a kid, you got to get it renewed every 5. So I needed a new passport. And then next thing you know, we're flying to the States. 2 scrawny, skinny dudes. I tell everyone I'll never forget flying through, I can't remember if it was Dallas or Houston, and just walking up to the immigration guy, stamps my passport and says, welcome home, boys. And I'm pretty sure both my brother and I, we just started crying. And then we flew into Little Rock at night. And I remember just thinking, wow, like, what an amazing city. I've never seen so many lights, kind of thing. And then next thing you know, everything just smelled different, felt different. Everything was just so different about everything. After coming back from my mission, I spent a year in Arkansas, and then I moved to El Paso, and it was, I honestly don't know what I expected about El Paso. I don't think I had any idea really what I was getting into. But at the beginning, I can tell you that I did not like it. I did not like it because, Hondurans are very different from Mexicans, particularly northern Mexicans. I can feel that there's probably a little more similarities, once you get into the Tuxtla, area, or the Chiapas area in Mexico when it comes to Honduras. More Mayan area, just completely, blindsided by it all. I feel that in Arkansas, people could notice my accent, depending on a couple of different words in English. But in El Paso, I just stood out immediately. My accent just stood out immediately. And people would immediately ask me where I was from. Immediately. And, I was working at a restaurant downtown El Paso, mostly Mexican people, and I'd start speaking in Spanish. And, I even made a game out of it, basically, where I would tell them that I was going to give them a free dessert if they could guess where I was from. They never guess. No one knows where Honduras is. No one cares, I feel. And they never guessed it. So I think that was one of the biggest things. It was the language, my accent. My interpretation of words. Like pisto, which in Honduras means money, yet in El Paso it means alcohol, or I can't remember other words at this point, but things like that. And then after that, the food. Hondurans don't eat spicy food. El Paso people love spicy food. People on the border love spicy food. Everything's always spicy. It's always got something going on. And it took me a while to get used to it. And then probably on another note, it's just that I feel like it just took me a while to get used to hanging out with, I made friends. I made Mexican friends easily, but it was still just an interesting dynamic through it all.